Okay, this is Paul Moffat here from Velosophy, and on the other side, I have Assaf from Drkhorse.
Hello.
We're both coaches in Vancouver, and we just wanted to start a little podcast type thing. We've been chatting quite a bit over the last few weeks, and Assaf and I have some really interesting conversations, and often these lead to things that we talk to our athletes about or other coaches. So we just thought we'd open it up for everyone to participate in and listen into that. So the general tone is we're just having a conversation and we're just going to leave things where they naturally go. But some of the topics we've talked about, want to continue talking about are polarized training methods, supplements like the pitfalls and benefits, like why would you use beet juice over cherry juice? What are their applications? What do you need to know about timing and dosage and things like that? Race tactics, passive training aids. That's something that I want to tackle today because we had a really interesting conversation last week that I think would be super helpful for people right now. And yeah, so we'll just start with who you are, Asaf, and a little bit about Drkhorse and what you guys do.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. So, yeah, I'm excited. I think this is a very cool opportunity to finally share some of the great conversations we've had. Um, so, yeah, Drkhorse. Maybe let's start from the beginning. So, for me, I've been here in Vancouver. Originally, I'm from Israel, and I came here in 2012 to do my master's in thermoregulations and ventilation in human physiology. Um, and I started coaching not long after that. I was coaching before I came to Canada, but in Canada, I started coaching about a year into my master's. And it just kind of snowballed. I started with just one person. I wasn't really sure I wanted to do it again, but I was convinced into it, and then snowballed. And Drkhorse kind of was created along the way when I started working alongside Laura Brown, who is a bronze medalist from Rio from the track for Canada. And together with her, we came up with a brand. And along the way, we also picked up just a really bright person called Jem Arnold, who's a very good researcher and also coach himself and an elite racer. And our focus is really working with more of the competitive elite and national team riders.
And
And
be a leaguers like myself.
yeah, kind of the higher echelon, the upper echelon of the beer leaguers.
Well, thanks
That's
for saying
my yeah. That's
that.
my that's really my point of focus. I love working with masters athletes. I love working with individuals who are taking things very seriously, but are not super serious about doing just cycling. That they have a lot of other things
Yeah, and
happening.
you've raced professionally yourself, right?
I've raced at the professional levels with the Israeli national team. So um, we attended races like the Presidential Tour of Turkey. I was also racing for a short period of time in the States when I did my undergrad there. And I raced in the East Coast, some of the bigger races there, the Tour of Gila and all of those things. And as a junior, as I was climbing the ranks, I raced mostly in Belgium and the Netherlands and that part of Western Europe. Yeah, so that's my background. And now I'm still doing research. I'm doing my PhD at the University of British Columbia, focusing primarily on human performance. So yeah. Oh, yeah. One more thing is Drkhorse is also doing laboratory assessments. So we do performance assessments for the general public, and we have quite an interesting novel way of doing it, which is also somewhat related to my PhD. So yeah, that's pretty
Awesome.
much me.
Thanks, Asaf. And yeah, so for those of you who don't know, Asaf actually coached me last year to an unexpected provincial titleship. I was going for
Uh,
a road race titleship and ended up with a criterion one. But
yeah.
yeah, things happen how they happen. Um, Yeah, and it's super interesting talking to Assaf because of his research and his PhD, and he's able to translate all the work that he's doing into layman's terms, which really helps. And then I'm able to whittle that down a little bit further and communicate some of those things to my athletes. So um, myself, I'm always been a cycling enthusiast. I came to Vancouver to ride freestyle BMX, and that was the only thing I ever really wanted to do. You wouldn't catch me dead in a pair of Lycra shorts. And fast forward 10 years later, and here I am doing it as a profession. I have a Bachelor of Science in Sports and Exercise, hence why I can understand what Asaf's saying most of the time, although he's about 2 or 3 degrees. He's like second degree black belt in physiology, and I'm probably like a green belt or something like that. I run a coaching business too, and we work with various athletes. Our primary demographic of people training for fondas and big events and things like that. We do online coaching and outdoor classes, and also personal training. Obviously, some of those services are on the pause button right now with COVID restrictions, but we're still doing lots of online coaching, which is kind of where we're leading these conversations towards.
Great.
So something that was awesome working with you last year, Assaf, is learning about polarized training. And before that, I feel like the emphasis was on anaerobic and high intensity and like maximizing intensity over short periods, and that you could get just as fit in a small amount of time as you could if you did lots of base miles. And
Right.
then doing this polarized training method with you, where we did a lot of like really low intensity, high volume stuff, as well as like some very high speed stuff, was super novel to me. And the effects are astounding. Can you tell us a little bit more about, maybe for people who don't understand what polarized training methods are, and why they've been helpful for athletes?
Yeah. Yeah. So in a nutshell, polarized training is really working on both sides of the athlete. So it's top end, high intensity efforts, and then the lower intensity, high volume workouts. And really, that's kind of the focus of the plan year round, where the majority of the time, I would say around 90 to 95% of the time, you really see that the individual is spending their training at the lower end, at the low intensity efforts. Now, where it came from, actually, the way it came about was somewhat of a coincidence. The individual, the researcher who is considered the father of polarized training, is Stephen Seiler, Professor Stephen Seiler, and he essentially flew to Norway, I believe, and had a first encounter with what one of their top athletes was doing when it was running, just out on his run. He noticed that one of their top athletes that has a massive VO2 was running alongside him, and then when they came to the hill, she started walking. And he was very surprised. He thought she was going to attack the climb and, go till she can't go any further and just leave him out there, But that didn't happen. And he was very surprised, and he tried to understand why that is. And he started to ask questions of those athletes. They had really high caliber athletes, primarily cross-country skiers with really massive VO2 maxes and big numbers. And so what he saw was that for the majority of time, they spent actually training at low intensity for large volumes for a very long duration. And he started asking why that is, and what is it really something that can help people like where he came from, that are more no pain, no gain type athletes, get better results. And then when he started to really dig through it, he found that that model, the polarized model, and spending more time doing long duration at low intensity was actually a big contributor to how those athletes have been able to be so successful. So he adopted it, and he started to do more research on it, and then others followed him. And today we really see that model is good for a number of reasons. So first, yes, the physiology is something that gets a big help from that type of training. The body likes to spend time at low intensity for long durations, much more than it likes to go super, super hard. But it's not that one is more important than the other. It's just that you are able to contribute to both ends when you train that way, because first of all, yes, the body likes to go slow for long periods of time, but then it also arrives fresher at the high intensity stuff. So you can do more reps, you can do them at higher speeds and higher power.
That's what I noticed from the training plan, is like being fresher going into racing, or feeling like I could hit my high intensity workouts a lot more comfortably than I had in the past, when I was just like trying to do VO2s all week long.
Correct. So one of the things that's really cool that came out of it is the concept of consistency. And a polarized model essentially allows you to do what you want, what you like, which is riding your bike, and doing it more and more often. And you're not as tired. So you don't have to combat fatigue all the time. Again, you can periodize it in a way that during some parts of the year you really aren't tired and you can do more volume, and sometimes of the year you want to have some fatigue, some acute fatigue. But across a season, like I approach my athletes over the last couple of seasons, and I think I even asked you, if you had to, could you repeat this program again? Yeah, and the majority of cases was yes, no problem. Like it was actually fairly easy. But the results are there and the improvement is there. And I had, I kind of learned it the hard way. I had a lot of athletes that I didn't use this method with, and we did go with a no pain, no gain type mentality, and I just tore them apart. Just ripped them apart. And they lasted through a season, and I asked them, I didn't need to ask. They were like, listen, I'm done. Like, whew.
Yeah. No, and you touch on a really good point there. I recently had a interview with an athlete who was also a provincial champion, and he's like, is there a possibility of doing lower intensity training and having the same result? And I was like, well, yeah, like if we use a polarized training method, but why do you ask that? And he's like, because I can't imagine doing the same plan that I did last year to get my provincial championship. I was just like, he's like, I got it, and that felt amazing, but I've never felt worse. Like, I don't want to put myself through that anymore. And I think part of the problem is, there's a lot of media outlets when it comes to both fitness and cycling, and for the last decade or so, we've just bought into this, you got to crush yourself to see results. Like if you're not testing your limitations, you're not going to get past those limits. And it's simply not the case, and I had to retrain myself. So there's a huge mental component to it as well. It was a massive test of faith to be like, okay, I'm not feeling crushed after my workouts. Is this actually working? So like, because it's just been programmed by all the stuff through the fitness industry that we read, and they're subjected to, even GCN to some extent. I remember when they did the big thing about HIIT training, and there is research to back that up, but it doesn't have to be like that, right? And for most of the athletes that we see, they're not, well, you're an exception, but most of the athletes that I see, they're not professional paid athletes. They don't have the time in their schedule to smash themselves and then dedicate the entire day to recovery. They have to go back to work and kids and things like that. So it makes it even harder to dig that deep and then go back to normal day living, right? So
yeah, totally. That's, you've touched upon so many things, and we can break it down one by one, but just to start, I think you're absolutely right about how the media portrays the type of training a person should do. This COVID period was actually such a critical point for a lot of athletes that were stuck at home and were asking, what should I do? Because now you have no more races. You can't test yourself. Motivation is um, it's low for, I mean, you want to train, like you want to do something, but now you don't have a race to aim for. So your motivation needs to change. But the problem is people are also afraid that because they don't have the races, they're going to lose fitness.
Yeah.
And even just by saying that, it's so counterintuitive. Like the races don't make you, yes, some races definitely make you faster. And depending on how many you can actually do, a lot of pros would get faster by just racing a lot. But for us, kind of mortals, it's not the case. We can't race every day and do the Tour de France and Giro and Vuelta. That's not the case. So I think people started to think, okay, I don't have races, so I'm just going to train really, really, really hard, blow myself up. And after a month of doing that, they were gone. Like they were just so done.
Yeah.
And motivation is low, and you just feel like crap because you beat yourself up.
Yeah.
So the point that I'm trying to get to is the people that took this time and said, okay, there are no more races. I'm just going to treat it like an extension of my winter training, and just build up on my volume and do more of that because I can work from home and I can go out and do whatever I want, or I need to stay indoor, but I don't want to smash myself on the trainer every time. I mean, it's hard enough to get on the trainer. I don't want to feel like I'm being punished. So volume, people that adopted the volume, I've been seeing some amazing results with that. So more consistency, higher gains in power across the rev range, being able to repeat the efforts more. All those aspects are just up. So.
Yeah, I guess the zone one training, the feedback that I get is it's hard it's like a test of faith for most athletes because it's such a huge. So for those of you who are familiar with what we're talking about, well, rather for those who are unfamiliar, what we're talking about is kind of more like the 3 to 5 hour endurance range, like long riding, right? Most of us are focused so much on increasing FTP. And when we break down what FTP is, when you're riding at that number, it's 40 to 60 minutes of power, right? If you're if you're an athlete that can dig deep mentally, you can maybe get 60 minutes at that power, right? So we've been sitting here developing this engine for seasons and seasons. And I found myself and through my athletes that once you reach a certain peak, then each season it's really hard to progress on top of that. So for example, an athlete who's got an FTP of 350 watts, if we get an extra 5 watts the next year, we're jumping up and down and celebrating. And that's only an extra 5 watts over like 40 to 60 minutes, which, the amount of training invested in that to get that payload is a lot. Whereas it takes time to develop that zone one engine where it's like low intensity, staying underneath your lactate threshold. But if you gain 10 watts there, that's 10 watts over 3 to 5 hours.
Yes.
So in terms of performance, like what would you rather have? Like 5 extra watts over 40 minutes or 5 extra watts over 3 to 5 hours? So the only thing that I found personally is you don't get that self-gratification of an FTP test, like where it's like, oh, here's your number, like you did a hard effort, here's where you're at right now. For zone one, because we use heart rate. So when I did my testing with Assaf, we went to the lab and he used a heart rate monitor while we tested lactate levels and O2 saturation of the muscle, and saw when that lactate started to build up. And that became my signature. So for me, it was 145 beats per minute. So whatever power I was doing at that time, we're looking at trying to increase that over several weeks. And I found it took a long time to see that. So in terms of self-gratification, is not like FTP where you see changes in a short period of time.
Yeah.
It's a much bigger investment, but that investment pays off big time if you're ready to make that commitment.
Yeah, I forgot to touch. I'll just go back to the point that I made in the beginning of my.
Yeah.
So the media and how everything is shown there, and even in research, is really pushing on the intensity side of things and not so much on the volume. And it's just because it's easier to access. Same thing with
Yeah.
FTP. It's
It's
20
an easy
minutes.
sell.
Yeah, exactly. It's an easy sell. It is important, but because it's easier to access and easier to test, it's much more amplified. And so we have this tendency, even when you skim through the research, you see the amount of work that's been done on intensity versus the amount of work that's been done on duration.
Right.
It's just easier to test.
Yeah.
I can't. Somebody comes to the lab and I ask them to do a VO2 max test. That's 12 to 15 minutes. Or ask them to do repeated efforts to exhaustion. They'll do 10. Depending on the intensity, but it's really short. It's a 1 hour, 1.5 hour test. If I were to ask someone to volunteer to do a 3 to 4 hour ride on the trainer so I can see what happens when they bonk, good luck.
Yeah, no one's
I
going to
know.
sign up for that.
Yeah. I know one guy who did it, and that's Jim, who's working with me, and he is kind of the crazy scientist. So he'll test anything on himself.
Yeah, he's so enthusiastic about what he's doing all the time. He's
Yeah,
always so excited to talk about research and
totally,
stuff. I'm like, dude, you
totally.
lost me 10 minutes ago. He's still going.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
he did 3 hours on the rollers, um, no food, and he was monitoring his glucose the whole time and VO2, everything.
Right,
And
right.
I've never seen that before, and it was amazing to watch. And you know what? You start to understand that actually going long and going hard is very similar. So when you go long to exhaustion and when you go hard to exhaustion, actually recovering from long to exhaustion takes a lot more time because you're depleting the system in a way that's extremely hard to replenish.
Yeah.
If you ever bonked in a ride, it's terrible.
Yeah.
It's terrible. It's not, it takes sometimes days to recover. Or even in a race situation, you think, man, that was a very hard race. Now I need to recover for a few days from it. It's not because of how hard you went. It's because of the fact that you went hard multiple times for very brief periods, but it was over 3 hours, 4 hours. So we need to put that in mind and just prioritize the volume in cycling before we do anything else. One of the best things that kind of classic examples of how athletes tend to read the map wrong is when you have somebody who comes to a crit and they sit in the pack and then they make it to the end and they're done. Like they can't win because they can't win the sprint, or they can't, they get dropped when the pace goes really, really high. And they come to me and they say, well, listen, I don't have the speed. I don't have the kick. I can't, when it goes really hard, I can't hold the pace. So I need to do more high intensity and, just more sprints, more stuff. And I'm like, listen, if you tell me that story again, just look at where you got it wrong. You get to the end after depleting your entire tank because you can't hold the easy pace that those guys are at. And for you, it's a hard pace because you didn't work on your base.
Yeah.
Your base is weak. So you get to the end, you're done. And those guys have just been kind of, soft pedaling or, relatively speaking, going at tempo when you're redlining, and they make it to the end, they can push it. So that's really kind of the best example of why zone 1 training and doing all the low intensity stuff is so valuable. You have to put in the time, and the gains are massive. And the nice thing about it is it's yours to keep for much longer than the high intensity stuff.
Yeah, it lasts a long time.
Yeah.
And like another anecdote to support that, I had a client over winter who was doing lots of track racing, and we got him doing long aerobic zone 1. So you do like 2 4-hour rides a week, and then one speed-based workout that was shorter but not too fatiguing. and then Friday night racing. And he's like, I know my sprint power hasn't improved that much, but his racing was way, way better at the end. And he commented several times, he's like, it's so weird. I didn't think that doing like low intensity aerobic work was going to help my track racing, but it was, like you said, it was the riding in between the efforts that improved. So when he wasn't sprinting, he was able to recover faster and able to hang with the group without feeling like he was going over his threshold, if you will. Yeah.
Sure.
And another thing I think athletes kind of get wrong is everyone's looking for from a coach is a black and white statement, right? So like, this is the best way of training and that is wrong, right? And the fitness industry is, because I come from the personal training world as well, where it is rife with this, like, if you are not doing this with your clients, you are doing something wrong. Or if you're using this exercise, you're on route to injury. And really, the body doesn't really work like that. And like, being a scientist is about being objective and seeing value in lots of places and always thinking, is there areas to improve? So even questioning the value of polarized training, it should be normal, right?
Totally.
And so with my athletes, I use an array of methods. Like, I still use FTP tests, I still use FTP methodologies, but I'll phase it in. So I'll use zone one training for the first part, getting their base, and then drip feeding some of the stuff that they really like to do. So maybe I have an athlete who likes to go deep, likes to go hard, and maybe it's not the best training in terms of performance, but from a mental capacity standpoint, that's what they're there for. That's what they're paying me for. So I kind of
Yeah.
got to drip feed what they need in and kind of give them a little bit of what they want at the same time. So
Totally.
I think we should leave some of the other zone one stuff for next week, because we could just keep going on
For sure.
all week about this. I wanted to give people a little bit of a nugget today, because of what we're going through as restrictions and COVID and thinking about our health and breathing and things like that. I started, and it was particularly thinking about one client that I had who's becoming sensitive to their health because of all the things that we're being told right now. So like, we're always being asked to monitor our symptoms for breathing, and are you experiencing any of these symptoms for COVID? So they started to notice their breathing more than they normally would, right? And as a result, they got afraid to train, essentially. And it set back their training big time. So I just wanted to chat about like some passive means that we can use for athletes, or if you are listening to this podcast at some point, hopefully people do listen. But there are ways to improve your fitness without necessarily thrashing yourself on the bike or even being on the bike. One of the ways that I did it, and we were kind of briefly discussed it last week, is I got my athlete to do a nice easy zone 1 hour ride with a couple sprints at the end, nothing too hard. They came off the bike completely unfatigued, and then they went and took a hot bath afterwards. So I did a little research, and this came through an ACE study, American Council of Exercise, and they did VO2 max testing on athletes, and they took three groups. So they had their control group, they had a group who had a thermal core vest, so it's just a vest that warms your core up, and then a third group that took hot bath for about half an hour after training. All of them had the same training, and they all trained for the same period. And what they found was the group who took the hot baths after their VO2 training had a significant increase in their VO2 max tests at the end of the training sessions. The people with the core vest had variable results, so there was no significance to the improvements that they saw. And the controlled group obviously was they still improved because of the training plan, but not as significantly as the hot bath group. And I know that you said that there's some research coming out on that. Is there anything that you've read that supports stuff like that?
Yeah. I mean, there's So when it comes to heat, one of the, if anybody's interested in learning about the effects of heat on performance, the researcher I would Google is Dr. Stephen Chung from Brock University. He has put out a lot of information. I think he has 2 or 3 books on the topic that are great reads. And the general consensus is that being heat adapted or exposing yourself to heat post-exercise, or kind of integrating it into your training, has benefits. What is the extent? That varies, but at the end of the day, there seems to be a benefit of doing some sort of a heat exposure. I've also recently listened to a podcast discussing the difference between using hot baths versus sauna, and sauna seems to have better improvements versus the hot bath.
Yeah.
Not entirely sure what the mechanisms are, but I think it's, I don't know, I'm not entirely sure. I mean, there's definitely something going on there. There's a few things, probably anywhere from heat shock proteins to blood flow and circulation. Probably even just the sensation of being in the water itself after exercise, stuff like that. So the relaxation part is probably big as well. But those factors can definitely enhance, they can probably enhance performance. It's been a while since I looked at that topic, since my master's. We're talking about, unfortunately, somewhere in the area of 6 years now. Yeah. But one of the things that I did, for example, in my master's, was we passively heated participants. This is a bit different because you asked about post-exercise and this is pre-exercise, but still, we had a study where we passively heated individuals in a hot tub. It was 40 degrees Celsius, and they sat in until the core temperature was up by 1 degree from baseline. So pretty darn warm. Yeah. Not the most pleasant thing. And then we put them on the bike immediately, kept them warm, covered them up, and then they had to do a Wingate test. So, and we saw that without any...
Were you guys just having a bad day and you needed to take it out on somebody, or?
Listen, my experiments are notorious for not being the most pleasant thing in the world. So, but hey, if anybody wants to volunteer, my door's open.
I'm always a sucker for punishment. So,
well, I didn't even tell you what type of instrumentation we used to measure the core. We'll leave that aside.
That's for a different podcast. That's the After Dark Drkhorse podcast.
Exactly. There's a reason why it's called Drkhorse. Anyway, so what we found was that passive hyperthermia actually aided in performance. So it improved performance. They were able to push bigger numbers compared to just a kind of a cold start.
Right.
So definitely temperature is a big one. And that's a good way to kind of improve your performance when you're stuck at home. If you have a sauna, actually, that's probably even better. So as far as the protocol on how to do it, I'm probably not the best person to ask, but I can pull up for our next chat. I can probably pull up some recommendations from Dr. Chung and see
that'd be cool.
That group in general, and see what they say. Yeah,
that'd be awesome. And then that also trails me down the thought, and this is always something that it doesn't trouble me, but it's always like a concern of mine, is people misreading the research and stuff that they're getting through media outlets and stuff like that. For example, like ice baths versus what we're talking about, recovery versus the training effect. So, for example, like doing an ice bath right after your event so that you can train the next day. Sometimes, I don't claim to know anything about ice baths, but being ready and fresh for the next day of training versus getting a training effect. Those are
Mm.
two different things, and people don't always use them well. And I'm going to
Yeah.
talk about nutrition the next few weeks because there's a bit of misconception about like cherry juice and the recovery effect versus the training effect. So the training effect is kind of like you're exposing yourself to inflammation and then getting training adaptations from that. And sometimes there's at least some evidence to show that you can stifle that
Yeah.
adaptive process by using these other methods. So yeah,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts there?
Well, if we don't want to dive too deep into the science behind it and just want to save that for later, I will say that in many cases when athletes try to find advice on recovery, my first question is recovery from what? What are you
Right.
doing that requires you to recover so much? So if you're constantly tired and you're trying to figure out ways to relieve some of that fatigue, my question is what are you doing that's causing that fatigue in the first place? So in a group chat that both you and I are on, I've noticed somebody asking about tips on recovery nutrition
Yeah.
and and especially post-ride food. And I was thinking, what type of training is this person doing that requires kind of a special type of meal to replenish the system? I mean, yes, there are probably benefits to eating, let's say, uh, maybe high quality protein and high quality carbs and stuff like that post exercise, and just chugging down I don't know, McDonald's or something like that, right?
Right.
So there's probably yes, there are clear benefits to that. But my first question was, and I probably should have asked him that, maybe I will, was what are you doing in your daily routine that's even requiring you to ask that question? I mean, if you have a need to recover, and recovery being not being exhausted, then you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
Especially now, especially during COVID. I think one of the things that people have to be aware about is, and we said that, listening to your body and listening to your breathing and being more aware of what your body's telling you. Now it's probably more prevalent than ever. We will have discussions on different advice and tips on how to improve your performance. But those conversations will very likely, when we touch upon what the research is telling us about beetroot juice and about using, I don't know, a hypoxic tent, for example, for training.
Yeah.
Those are like in your top
Marginal,
percentile, right? It's marginal gains. I think what's important is to talk about the broader aspects first and to make sure people have the fundamentals down to a T. Like, that's really important. So when you have this need to come up with a solution to a problem, especially when we're dealing with important things like recovery and diet and training, make sure those aspects are well taken care of. So consult with
Yeah.
a coach, a nutritionist, a psychologist, whatever you need to dial those things in before you start to look at, I should buy this supplement, or I should,
Right.
ramp up my beet juice intake.
I think that's something that, so for any of the coaches that are listening here, like we sympathize with your plight. We're always in battle with the clickbait out there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where all the misinformation comes from, or at least the misapplication of good information. For example,
Yeah.
like I touched on cherry juice. I did my own research. I was like, wow, I didn't know that, and I was subject to the marketing and advertising around it, and was having cherry juice on my drinks, and then did some research, and it said it's not necessarily that great during the adaptative phase of your training. Like, it's great in between hard racing for recovery, but if you're actually trying to create an adaptative phase and you want to facilitate inflammation and recovery from that, it can stifle your results. So we don't recommend doing that. However, there's tons of products put out there and be like, this is an ergogenic aid. If you want your cycling to improve, you need to have this. And it's such a like generalized statement, right? And there is some truth in what they're saying, but it doesn't delve deep enough into it or clear enough for most athletes to get good benefits from it. But
Yeah.
I think you hit the nail on the head there is in the broader perspective, like if we're looking at nutrition and you're asking about supplementation, how good is your nutrition first? Before we're
Yeah.
talking about ergogenic aids, go for the low hanging fruit. Just, are you eating like 3 meals a day? Are you having breakfast, lunch, and dinner? Do you have good snacking habits, things like that? You know, like what is your pre-ride, post-ride, during ride food consumption looks like? Because if you're missing meals there, that could be the biggest gain for you. And that's something that I learned from you through Zone 1 training. So bring it back to that topic really quickly,
Yeah.
is low hanging fruit. That was the best thing I ever learned. Was the first time I did a 4-hour ride, and you set me a goal: try not to unclip and try not to coast. I had realized that even though it was low intensity, it was so hard because I'd never just had my feet going for 4 hours in a row without having to stop. So yeah, like you said, have some perspective and look for the low hanging fruit first, and then think about the marginal gains. So
Yeah, you brought up a big topic actually about not coasting. I would add that to maybe a next chapter down the
okay,
line
I'm gonna put that
between
in the notes.
indoor and outdoor training. I think that is probably one of the more relevant aspects nowadays with the booming of indoor cycling and whether it's on a Zwift, Peloton, Trainer Road, any one of these platforms, or just riding on your trainer, looking at the clock, if anybody still does that. Massive differences between riding indoors and riding outdoors. And that's another training aspect that we need to focus on, which is specificity. Like how do you train your body to answer a certain need or a certain goal, right? So that's another big one. Training in general, training methodologies. What you said about trying to find the right fit for the individual is, and how that's more important than just focusing on one training methodology. I think that's extremely important. People are different. Their physiologies are slightly different, even though we are all kind of roughly in the same. We're all quite similar as far as our responses to different training loads. But there are some variations that are extremely critical, which is what are you training for and what triggers you? What really triggers you? What keeps you consistent in your training? And I would kind of be careful with the word motivation, especially now, because motivation is something that has huge swings. And I think for any coach and any athlete, you want to build a training program that answers someone's desire to stay committed, whatever that takes. If it's looking at their lifestyle, their family, their business, their schedule, their stress, and to make sure that's all in the right priority, to make sure that they take care of themselves through training. If training becomes this imposition, if it becomes another thing they have to do on the day, on their to-do list, that's not gonna hold.
Life TSS versus training TSS. Managing
like
the two. So we're gonna leave it there. The last little note that I want to talk about, and we'll just do this for 5 minutes, is motivation, like you just mentioned. So right now, with events being canceled and things like that, definitely a lot of unmotivated individuals. I just wanted to share an anecdote from an athlete that I had recently. Her name's Angela Chang, and she was training for the Buckshot and now BC Epic. And when her event was canceled, she was just devastated. She had trained so hard. We had it was the most customized training plan I've ever made for someone, right down to like routes and stuff like that. Because she did a lot of zone 1 training, and the highest intensity we ever really got to was sweet spot, or that anaerobic threshold figure that we established during her lactate 2 test.
Yeah.
And she just spent hours and hours on it. So to have that tangible goal removed from her was savage at the time, after investing all this time. But she really surprised me, because I was like, how am I going to help keep this athlete motivated? Because I know that the work that she's done is going to carry forward to next year. So we're just talking about, let's keep it going, prepare for next year. But she came up with her own creative solution, and she just decided to replicate the event herself. Thankfully, that event was actually but it was a self-supported event. So she could replicate it quite well, doing it solo, in slightly different terrain to make it a little bit more convenient to get out to. But she replicated all the demands, the elevation, the distance, et cetera, and it kept her going. So, and what she actually said to me was, it wasn't even so much the event. She actually realized she really enjoyed all the training. And because we were so creative with the training plan, she's like, I've done things that I never thought I could do. In fact, one of her training rides was, we used that anaerobic threshold number. I was like, let's see if you can go up Cypress 3 times using that number, or if you need to scale it down a little bit, bring it down just a touch and do it 3 times. Well, I've never even been up Cypress 3 times. So she was doing things that I had never done before. And she realized that really your training goal is the incentive. But when you look back, regardless of how the event went, where the real value is the whole journey. Like enjoying the training, learning about yourself, meeting the obstacles and the limitations and overcoming them. And then that's really like, when you look back in years past, that's what you really remember. The end goal you talked about for sure, and like that becomes it. But like my Velosophy guys, some of our training rides are the best rides they do all year. The Whistler Fonda, they've done it 5 times, but when they're riding out there with each other and doing all these fun rides, the camaraderie and all the rest of that, that's what you end up remembering. So changing your focus to being about the journey and making some kind of tangible goal for yourself. How have you met that with your athletes? What's working to change their mental outlook on things?
Yeah, well, first of all, I love that story. I know Angela, when she came to the lab, very interesting and amazing person. Like, yeah.
And she drops off little bread gifts. She dropped off a bread this morning. I don't think I've
cool.
ever met anybody like that before. It's amazing. So.
No, she's amazing. I think for my athletes, it's been nothing really has changed. I mean, as you probably know, and can attest to, I don't work with go first type coaching. Like, to me, it's really all about, you got to do it for a different reason. Like, you're not doing it to please me. You're not doing it to put a jersey or a medal on the wall. I mean, those are goals that drive us, but they're not the ultimate destination. You know, it's just something you have listed out. So a lot of my athletes, not everybody, but a lot of my athletes just kept on going. And when I told them, listen, we just got a break from racing. You can just train as much as you want. You can be as fit as you want. You got to use this time to do that. They use that as fuel. And a lot of them really raised the bar, which is amazing to watch. I think that it's a mental shift that a lot of people should probably consider. This whole cycling thing is not, it's not about a single event. I mean, this sport is arguably one of the toughest sports in the world. And you do it as a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle choice. So it allows you to break away from your normal routine.
Mm-hmm.
It allows you to test yourself on a daily basis and to give you a bit of an escape. And it gives you this ability to commit to something that's really done for yourself.
Yeah.
So if you have a pandemic or you have something else like an injury that takes it away from you, or takes the events away from you, that shouldn't change your lifestyle. It's just something on your list. So just change the list. Make it more about yourself.
I like that. Just change the list. That's a great way of looking at it.
Yeah. So I think the story about Angela reflects a lot of my athletes as well. They've learned over the years to enjoy the process.
Yeah.
And they've learned to appreciate the fact that they become these badass motherfuckers. And right? Like, that's what you want. Yeah. You're not doing it to say, oh, I beat this guy or beat that guy, which is fun. And that's a huge help for sure. But at the end of the day, you're out there, you're training,
Yeah. The real adventure is along the way to your goal. That's totally it. And you got to think of it as an adventure, because it really is, right? And
yeah.
To me, I'm one of the few who actually likes training almost as much, if not more, than the racing.
On that note, I would say if you're not enjoying your training, something is wrong with the way you train.
Yeah.
So I think that is something that we've touched upon multiple times in this conversation. If you get to the point where you feel like it's a burden and it's a task, then you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
This needs to be something you want to do, that you wish you can do.
For, with athletes now more than ever, if you have a coach, it's imperative to be like really honest about where you're at. If your motivation isn't there and it's because of your training, there's so many other ways we can go, so many different directions, right?
Correct.
And for me and a lot of the athletes that I train, I tend to find that people who are similar to me gravitate towards my training style. And the fitness that I gain becomes a motivator, because I like to explore. That comes from my BMXing background, like rolling down different alleyways, finding stuff to ride. And the fitter you get, the further you can go, the newer places you can explore, the more challenging routes you can go. So if you're bored with the training, or you're bored with your routes, well, get creative. Like, don't be a boring person.
Your coach should get creative. Yeah, exactly.
Or talk to your coach. I have like thousands of rides to go through, right? So
yeah,
use that fitness to take you places you've never been before. That can be the incentive. Like, there's so much great riding outside of the usual spots, like Horseshoe Bay, Sea to Sky, Cypress, Seymour. Those are great, but
yeah,
how many of my athletes have been out to the valley? I'd say less than 10%. So I've been doing rides with them out there, and like, oh man, I didn't even think I could get out there on my own. We have mapping tools now and all sorts of great stuff. So
even indoors, it's a different world,
Yeah.
So
all right, well, let's leave it there. Thanks, Assaf. That was really great. Hopefully,
my pleasure.
Hopefully we keep this going and get a little audience growing here. And if you do happen to catch this and you've got topics for us, either email me at paulmoff, PAULMOF @gmail.com, or leave some comments on wherever you found this video, and we'll start to tackle those questions. Thanks, awesome,
mate. Thanks, Paul.